Thank you for joining us today to share your near-death experience. Can you start by telling us how it all began? Of course. It really came out of nowhere. I'd been having some autoimmune issues like fibromyalgia and rosacea, but nothing too serious. One day, I was at home with my daughter, just drinking a smoothie in the living room. And that's when things took a turn? Exactly. I suddenly started having difficulty breathing and swallowing. I have a history of anaphylaxis to shellfish, but I hadn't had an attack in years. I always kept EpiPens around just in case, but I'd never actually used one before. So what did you do? Well, being a nurse, I immediately recognized it as anaphylaxis. I gave myself the EpiPen, and my son drove me to the hospital. It was a small town, so I knew the nurse who was checking me in. Did that familiarity help the situation? Actually, it made me more worried. When she was checking me in, I thought, oh man, I'm in trouble. She has no idea what she's doing. She said, well, why did you come? You know, you took your EpiPen. What did you come to the hospital for? I was shocked. Even basic protocol for anaphylaxis states that after using an EpiPen, you go to the hospital. That sounds incredibly concerning. What happened next? She just set me in the hallway, saying they were waiting on a bed. But as a critical care nurse myself, I knew that an anaphylaxis case should go straight to the trauma bay. I was in the hallway with Strider, struggling to breathe, while people just walked around doing their thing. That must have been terrifying. It was. I had to give myself another shot of my EpiPen. Finally, the PA looked over and said, she's not looking so hot. They got me into a room, but by then I was crashing fast. My husband, Don, arrived and was telling them they needed to intubate me. Did they listen to him? They said, oh no, we've got plenty of time. But immediately after that, I just quit breathing. Wow, that's intense. What do you remember after that? This is where it gets strange. I popped out of my body. I could see what was going on, but I was so depersonalized that I didn't realize it was me. I remember thinking, man, who is that girl? She's pretty sick. That's fascinating. What happened after they intubated you? Everything went black for a while. The next thing I remember, I kind of materialized in the back seat of my sister's car. Your sister's car? Can you elaborate on that? Yes, it was bizarre. She was driving from Wisconsin to Kentucky. She had pulled over at a gas station, and it was pouring rain. I felt weird, like my body wasn't solid. I couldn't feel my bottom and legs against the seat. What did you see? I saw her clothes, and they didn't match. I remember thinking, what on earth is she wearing? She looks ridiculous. I sensed something was wrong. I saw her pull out her phone and type on Facebook, hang on, or hang in there, kiddo. I'm coming. That's quite detailed. What happened next? I popped back out of her car and found myself in this dark void. Can you describe this void? It was an expanse that was incredibly dark and seemed limitless. There was an oppressive nature to it. I had this feeling of needing to breathe, even though I knew I didn't need to. I felt stuck there, unable to figure out how to get out. How long did you feel you were in this void? Time is really different there. If I had to compare it to earthly time, I'd say it felt like about 10 years. 10 years? That must have been distressing. It was. I began to wonder if I had ever really lived, or if I had just imagined my life to have something to think about in that place. I didn't know why I was trapped there or what I could do to get out. Did you try to move or do anything? I would try to move, dragging myself forward a little bit, but then I'd get so tired and go into what I call the deep sleep, where I had no awareness. This cycle went on for what felt like a long time. Did you have any revelations during this time? Eventually, I started doing some introspection. I wondered if there was something I needed to understand or learn before I could leave. It occurred to me that the spiritual space I was in was a picture of the spiritual space I had made on Earth. What do you mean by that? Since my divorce many years ago, I had built this wall around myself to protect me and my kids. A wall is great for protection, but it also keeps people out and keeps you in. I had isolated myself, just going to work, taking care of my kids, and managing the house. I stopped putting myself out there. So you believe this isolation followed you to the other side? Exactly. As soon as I realized that this was the eternity I had created, everything changed. What happened then? There was this rumbling, and it exploded open. All these little pieces of the darkness, like shards, started flying around. The darkness was pushing further and further away. And then this spirit appeared. Can you describe this spirit? She was larger than life. She had bright orange hair on her head that was so bright, it looked like it was on fire. There were little licks of flame that were her hair. She was just such an attractive spirit, I couldn't keep myself from going to her. Did you recognize her? At first, no. But as I went to her, she held me against her chest, and I realized it was my grandmother. I was overcome with emotion, weeping with relief that someone was there and I wasn't alone anymore. How did it feel to be with her? Her energy was circling around me. Mine was still separate, but she was encompassing me. These shards of darkness kept trying to get in, but they'd hit her energy and be flung further away. Did she speak to you? Not verbally. She communicated telepathically. She said, "Calm yourself, dear one." And those words, it was like a chemical reaction. It felt like that immediate rush you get when given morphine or fentanyl before surgery. I felt it acting on every cell in my body, and I just immediately relaxed and melted into her. That sounds incredibly comforting. Did you ask her anything? Yes, I asked her if I was dead. She said, "Oh no, no. It's like you learned in science, energy can't be created or destroyed, it just changes forms. It's true here too. You don't die. You're either alive on the earth side, or you're super alive on this side, and it's just this transition." Did she explain more about your current state? She told me I was kind of in between, with a little cord holding me to my living side. She said if I wanted to go back to that, I could. What happened after your time with your grandmother? She kind of loved on me for a while, and I was just floating in this light. Then, suddenly, there was this rumbling, thundering presence that shook everything that ever had been or ever would be. That sounds intense. Can you describe it further? Every planet in the cosmos was rumbling with this energy. I could feel it in my bones. I knew something big was coming. I never saw a person, but I always refer to God as He because the energy felt very masculine to me. But it was also a mix of masculine and feminine because it was nurturing too. How did God communicate with you? He came to me and said telepathically, "I am." That's all he had to say. It was incredible. There was this resonance to it, like the key of D. It had a vibration that was alive and coursed through every part of me. How did you feel in that moment? At first, I got scared. I thought, oh no, I wasn't ready for this. He's going to look at all the stuff I've done wrong that I'm so ashamed of. But he wasn't judging me. He was super loving. Still, I felt like I wanted to hide. What happened next? He soothed me, and I knew we were going to go through my life. But all those things I was worried about, that I was dreading, never came up. So what did come up? He showed me the good things first, but not the ones I felt really good about. For example, there was a scene in a grocery store that I had forgotten about. A woman in line in front of me was short a couple dollars to pay her bill. I gave her the money to cover it. And God showed you this? Yes, and more than that. He showed me the ripple effect of that small act of kindness. I saw that woman later working in a food pantry, blessing people with food. God wanted me to see how every little act of kindness has an impact. That's beautiful. Did he show you anything else? We went through some negative things too. The one that really stuck with me was about controlling my thoughts about other people. Can you elaborate on that? God explained that a thought has a certain measure of energy to it, a word has even more, and an action has more than that. But it all starts with a thought. What you think about is what you talk about, which is what you end up doing. He showed me that when you have a negative thought about someone, that energy goes out there and attaches itself to that person. So our thoughts actually affect others? Exactly. When you have a negative thought about someone, you contribute to the negativity in that person. You attach more of that energy to them. This is why forgiveness is so important. How does forgiveness play into this? When you forgive people, that negative energy is able to be redirected. If they don't receive some measure of forgiveness, that energy is still attached to them and can't come away. When you forgive, that little bit of negative that you put on them comes off. That's a profound insight. Did God show you anything else? Yes, and this is where things got a bit intense. I realized I'd been angry with God for a long time. You expressed this anger to God directly? I did. I told him, you say you're this loving God, and you want the best for your children, and I call bullcrap. I confronted him about the pain my children had gone through when their father abandoned them. That must have been emotionally charged. How did God respond? He said, "Oh, you've completely misunderstood me." Then he showed me a vision of the future. What did you see? We were sitting in bleachers. My oldest son, David, was next to me, and we were watching my grandson, who was about 5 or 6, playing soccer. David looked at me and said, "Mom, I'm going to be the dad to him that I deserved." If it took his dad leaving for me to make that commitment, I get it. It's been worth it. Wow, that's powerful. Did this change your perspective? Absolutely. It was a confirmation from God. He was showing me that he was making manifest the things he had promised me. It completely changed my understanding of good and bad. How so? In the spiritual realm, good is forward motion, no matter how awful it feels. You're moving forward, you're growing, you're affecting the lives of other people, even if you're doing it through grief. That's considered good up there. That's a very different perspective from what we typically think. Exactly. He showed me that if you're doing good work, even though all the circumstances around it are difficult, you're still good. It's not bad. You're moving forward. The day you start just sitting in your recliner, stop interacting with the world, and only do what makes you comfortable, that's bad, even though nothing bad is happening. That's quite a revelation. Did you learn anything else about our purpose here? Yes, I learned that before we come to this life, there's actually a decision-making process we go through. We consult with spirit guides about what family we want to come to and what general lessons we'd like to learn while we're here. So you're saying we choose our lives? In a way, yes. I think we know the whole story before we come. We forget it when we get here, but before we came, we knew what traumas we were going to face, and we chose that life because those lessons would contribute to the growth of our spirit. That's a comforting thought, especially for those who have suffered greatly. Absolutely. When people ask about children with cancer or those born with severe disabilities, I tell them that those are the most sacrificial spirits. They're the ones who said, "I'll come void of even the ability to communicate just so I can show people a love that transcends speech." That's a beautiful perspective. Can you tell us about your return to your body? Well, I was in this light, and a kind of healing process began. The light came through my feet and started creeping up through my body, healing every little cell it came in contact with spiritually. How did that feel? It was incredibly powerful. I could feel this energy coming up through me. When it got to my tongue, beautiful songs came out that I couldn't stop. God's energy shot out my eyelashes, and it was so bright. It was like looking at the sun without any pain or your eyes dilating, and no heat. That sounds intense. What happened next? I tried to close my eyes because I didn't want any of the energy to get out, but it shot out my eyelashes anyway. It went out into the expanse and then came back. I could feel it going through the little curves in my brain, and then I felt like I got to this more core part of myself, and God was there. God was inside you? Yes, and it blew me away. I asked, "Do you mean to tell me you've been in there all the time? You're not this external thing?" And he said, "Well, I'm kind of both." I realized that God is in all of us, even the people who don't believe. How did that make you feel? It was incredible. He told me, "You can't take me out any more than you could take out your own father's DNA. I made you. I'm in there. You can choose to not acknowledge me, but I'm telling you, I'm in there. And I'm just waiting to love you." That's beautiful. So how did you decide to come back? I realized I was going to have to make this decision about going back. It seemed like a decision I had probably made before I was born, that I'd known this was going to happen and that I was going to choose to go back because I hadn't lived the life I was supposed to live, not even close. In fact, I had avoided doing the things I was supposed to do. Was it difficult to leave? I can't tell you how heartbroken I was to leave. My husband later asked me, "Why would you not want to come back to me?" And I told him, "I can't make you understand that until you've been there. You just can't understand it. I knew you'd be okay eventually." So what was your last interaction with God before you came back? I was crying, and I told God, "At least let me remember it, because if I can't remember this, I don't think I'll have any hope." And then you woke up? Yes, I woke up. I was off the ventilator. My sister was standing there, and the first thing I said was, "I was with God." How did the medical staff react to that? Well, it's ironic. I'm in St. Joseph Catholic Hospital, and the first person they send in to see me is a psychologist. They wrote that I was having delusions. You know, that stuff follows you in your medical records. I just couldn't get over the irony of that. That must have been frustrating. How have people reacted to your story since then? It has been frustrating at times. The reactions have been mixed, to say the least. Can you elaborate on that? Well, it's interesting. As someone who believed in God beforehand, I just assumed that all of my religious friends would be the ones most interested in hearing my story. But surprisingly, it's been the religious folks who have given me the hardest time. That's unexpected. Why do you think that is? I think I understand their reservations. When I tell them about the dark and empty void I was in, they say, "Wait a minute. You're a Christian. You should have gone right to heaven." But I've come to realize something important about near-death experiences. What's that? A near-death experience is not a death experience. I think God knows you're only going to be there for a short while. He knows you're going to decide to go back because you're not done yet. So I believe the near-death experience is tailored to what the experiencer needs so that they can go back and overcome things that are hindering them in their life. That's an interesting perspective. So you're saying your experience was personalized? Exactly. It's not the same experience you're going to give somebody who's coming to stay. For all the Christians who say, "Well, you didn't see Jesus and all these other things," I explain that I was just there for a little visit, and those little visits aren't like moving in. That makes sense. Can we go back to the moment when you saw your sister in her car? Did you ever confirm that with her? Yes, I did. When I woke up, she was there at the hospital, and I said, "I saw what you typed on Facebook." Of course, there was no way I could have known that, and it really freaked her out. "What else did you tell her?" I asked her, "Why were you wearing that outfit?" And she explained that when she got the call, she just grabbed whatever clothes were on the end of the bed, threw them on, packed a bag, and left. That's why she was mismatched. She also verified the pouring rain and pulling over, just as I had seen. That's quite compelling evidence. Did your experience change your outlook on life? Absolutely. It completely transformed how I view existence, purpose, and even the nature of good and bad. Can you elaborate on that? Well, one of the biggest takeaways was understanding the power of our thoughts and the importance of forgiveness. I learned that our thoughts have real energy and can affect others, even if we never act on them or speak them aloud. That's a big responsibility. It is. And it's why forgiveness is so crucial. When we hold on to negative thoughts about others, we're actually contributing to their negativity. But when we forgive, we release that negative energy and allow both ourselves and the other person to heal and grow. Has this changed how you interact with people? Definitely. I'm much more conscious of my thoughts now. I try to catch myself when I'm thinking negatively about someone and consciously shift to a more compassionate perspective. It's not always easy, but I found it incredibly transformative. What about your view on suffering and hardship? That's another area where my perspective has completely shifted. Before, I saw suffering as inherently bad and something to be avoided at all costs. Now, I understand that what we perceive as bad circumstances can actually be opportunities for tremendous growth and positive change. Can you give an example? Sure. Remember the vision God showed me of my son with his child? That came from a place of great pain, his father abandoning him. But that pain led him to make a powerful commitment to be a better father himself. Without that difficult experience, he might not have had the motivation to break the cycle. That's a powerful reframe of a painful situation. Exactly. And it's not just about big, life-altering events. Even small daily frustrations and challenges can be opportunities for growth if we approach them with the right mindset. How has this affected your daily life? I try to look at challenges differently now. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" I ask, "What can I learn from this?" Or, "How can this help me grow?" It doesn't always take away the pain or difficulty, but it does give it meaning and purpose. That's a profound shift. Has your experience changed your view on death? Absolutely. I no longer fear death the way I used to. I see it more as a transition than an ending. That doesn't mean I'm in a hurry to die. I value my life and the work I have to do here. But I know that what comes after is beautiful beyond imagination. That must be comforting. It is, but it also comes with a sense of responsibility. Knowing that this life is a chosen experience for our spiritual growth makes me want to make the most of every moment and every interaction. Speaking of interactions, has your experience changed how you relate to others? Definitely. I'm much more aware of the impact I have on others, even in small interactions. I try to approach everyone with more compassion and understanding, knowing that we're all on our own spiritual journeys. That's beautiful. Has it affected your relationships with your family? It has. I'm more patient with my children, more understanding of their struggles. I try to see the bigger picture in our conflicts and challenges. And I'm more open with them about spiritual matters, sharing what I've learned in a way that encourages them to think deeply about their own beliefs and experiences. Have you shared your experience with many people? I have, though it hasn't always been easy. As I mentioned, some people, especially those with strong religious beliefs, have been skeptical or even dismissive. But I've also had many people tell me that hearing about my experience has brought them comfort or changed their perspective on life and death. How do you handle the skepticism? I understand it. If I hadn't experienced it myself, I might be skeptical too. I don't try to convince anyone. I just share my story and let people take from it what they will. What I experienced was deeply personal and profound, and while I can't prove it to anyone else, I know in my heart that it was real. That's a very balanced approach. Has your experience changed your views on religion or spirituality? It has. I still consider myself a Christian, but my understanding of God and spirituality has expanded enormously. I see now that God is much bigger and more all-encompassing than I ever imagined. And I believe that all religions and spiritual paths are different ways of connecting with that divine presence. That's quite a shift from traditional Christian doctrine. It is, and I know it makes some people uncomfortable. But I can only speak my truth. My experience showed me a God of unconditional love, not judgment. A God who is within us all, regardless of our beliefs or actions. That doesn't align with some traditional religious teachings, but it's what I know to be true. Has this caused any conflicts with your church or religious community? There have been some challenges. Some people in my church have been very supportive and interested in my experience. Others have been more skeptical or concerned that my new perspectives don't align with church doctrine. I've had to navigate that carefully. How have you managed that? I try to focus on the core message of love and compassion that I believe is at the heart of all true spirituality. I don't push my experience on anyone, but I'm open to sharing if people are interested. And I've found that many people, even if they're not sure what to make of my near-death experience, resonate with the messages of love, forgiveness, and the power of our thoughts that I brought back with me. That's a wise approach. Has your experience affected your work as a nurse? Absolutely. I have a deeper empathy for my patients now, especially those facing serious illness or death. I'm more attuned to their emotional and spiritual needs, not just their physical symptoms. And I'm better able to provide comfort to patients and families dealing with end-of-life issues. That must be incredibly valuable in your field. It is. I've had many meaningful conversations with patients and their families about death and what might come after. While I'm always professional and respectful of their beliefs, being able to share a perspective of hope and peace has been deeply rewarding. It sounds like your experience has touched every aspect of your life. It really has. It's not always easy. Integrating such a profound experience into everyday life is an ongoing process. But I'm grateful for it every day. It's given me a sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of life that I never had before. Looking back, how do you feel about the difficult parts of your experience, like the dark void you were in? That's a great question. At the time, it was terrifying and oppressive. But now, I see it as a necessary part of my journey. It taught me about the consequences of isolating myself emotionally and spiritually. It was a vivid illustration of what can happen when we close ourselves off from love and connection. So you see value even in that challenging part of your experience? Absolutely. It was the contrast between that darkness and the incredible light and love I experienced afterward that made the message so powerful. I needed to understand the darkness to fully appreciate the light. That's a powerful perspective. Has your experience changed how you view time? Definitely. Time felt so different in the spiritual realm. What felt like years there was just a short period here on Earth. It's made me much more aware of how we perceive time and how limited our earthly perspective can be. How has that affected your daily life? I try to be more present in each moment, knowing that our time here is limited and precious. I'm less likely to get caught up in petty concerns or to put off important conversations or experiences. At the same time, I have a greater sense of the bigger picture, which helps me stay calm in the face of daily stresses. That sounds like a delicate balance. It is, and I'm still learning how to maintain it. But it's incredibly freeing to have that broader perspective. You mentioned earlier that you believe we choose our lives before we're born. Has that belief changed how you view challenges or suffering? Absolutely. It's given me a completely different perspective on the hardships we face. Instead of seeing them as random misfortunes or punishments, I now see them as opportunities we've chosen for our own growth and development. That must be comforting when facing difficulties. It is, though it doesn't always take away the pain. But it does give the pain meaning and purpose. When I'm going through something tough, I try to ask myself, what am I meant to learn from this? How can this help me grow? That's a powerful reframe. Has it changed how you support others who are suffering? Yes, it has. I'm more likely now to help people look for the meaning or potential growth in their challenges, rather than just sympathizing or trying to fix things. Of course, I'm still compassionate and I acknowledge their pain. But I also try to gently guide them toward seeing their difficulties as part of their spiritual journey. That's a delicate balance. How do people usually respond to that perspective? It varies. Some people find it immediately comforting and empowering. Others are resistant at first. It can be hard to see any positive in our pain when we're in the midst of it. But I've found that even for those who don't fully embrace the idea, just considering the possibility that their suffering might have a higher purpose can be helpful. Has your experience changed your view on free will and destiny? That's a complex question. My experience suggested that we do have a level of choice in the broad outlines of our lives. We choose the lessons we want to learn and the challenges we want to face. But once we're here, we have free will in how we respond to those challenges and what we do with the lessons we learn. So it's a mix of predestination and free will? In a way, yes. We set the stage before we're born, but we improvise the script once we're here. And our choices and actions have real consequences, both for ourselves and for others. That's fascinating. Has this belief changed how you make decisions? It has. I try to be more mindful of the potential ripple effects of my choices. I also try to look at difficult decisions as opportunities for growth, asking myself which choice aligns best with my higher purpose. That sounds like it could be a heavy responsibility. It can be. But it's also incredibly empowering. Knowing that I have a purpose here, that my life has meaning beyond just my day-to-day existence, gives me strength and motivation. It sounds like your experience has given you a lot of peace about life and death. Do you ever struggle with doubt or uncertainty? Of course. I'm still human, after all. There are times when the memory of my experience feels distant, or when the challenges of daily life make it hard to maintain that higher perspective. But even in those moments of doubt, there's a core of certainty that I can always come back to. How do you reconnect with that certainty when you're struggling? I have a few practices that help me. Meditation is a big one. It helps me quiet my mind and reconnect with that sense of divine presence. I also journal regularly about my experience and the insights I gained. Reading over those entries helps me reconnect with the feelings and realizations I had. Those sound like valuable practices. Do you have any advice for others who might be struggling with questions about life's purpose or the fear of death? My first piece of advice would be to cultivate a spiritual practice, whatever that means for you. It doesn't have to be religious in the traditional sense, but find ways to connect with something larger than yourself. That might be through nature, art, music, meditation, or whatever resonates with you. That's great advice. Anything else? I would also encourage people to really examine their beliefs about life, death, and what comes after. Are those beliefs serving you? Do they bring you peace and help you live a more meaningful life? If not, be open to exploring other perspectives. That can be challenging for some people, especially if they have strong religious beliefs. It can be, and I'm not suggesting that people abandon their faith. But I do think it's valuable to question our assumptions and be open to new understandings. My experience showed me that the divine is much bigger and more inclusive than many of our earthly religions suggest. That's a powerful message. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your experience or what you've learned from it? I think the most important thing I learned is the power of love. Not just romantic love or familial love, but a universal, unconditional love for all beings. That's what I felt from God, and it's what I strive to embody in my own life now. How do you try to embody that love in your daily life? It's a constant practice. I try to approach every interaction, even difficult ones, with compassion and understanding. I remind myself that everyone is on their own spiritual journey, facing their own challenges and learning their own lessons. It doesn't mean I let people walk all over me, but I try to respond to negativity with love rather than more negativity. That sounds challenging but rewarding. It is. It's not always easy, especially in the face of real injustice or cruelty. But I've found that responding with love and compassion, even when it's hard, creates a ripple effect that can transform situations in amazing ways. That's beautiful. Is there any final message you'd like to share with our listeners? I would say this: you are deeply, unconditionally loved. Your life has purpose and meaning, even when you can't see it. And every act of kindness, every loving thought, has more impact than you can imagine. So be gentle with yourself and others, and trust that there's a bigger picture beyond what we can see in our day-to-day lives. Thank you so much, Penny, for sharing your incredible experience and insights with us. I'm sure our viewers will find a lot to reflect on in your words. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story. I hope it brings some comfort and inspiration to those who hear it. I'm sure it will. And thank you to all our viewers for joining us for this fascinating conversation. Until next time, take care.